Welcome to MAP, the bi-weekly market access podcast hosted by me, Dr. Stefan Walzer. I am the innovator of Market Access 4.0 and a health economist by training and working in the fields of market access, reimbursement, pricing, and health economics since 2004. Discover Market Access 4.0 and unveil the future with our innovative solutions. mAxInsights, our fast and easy AI-based reimbursement planning platform. Dobo, our new revolutionizing way of creating reimbursement dossiers across the globe with the first and only dossier writing AI bot. Cubo, our new AI-based objection handling platform. And Wafle, train with Wafle's virtual reality genius in an immersive environment and with an AI-based counterpart. We are Market Access 4.0. So check out our website, marketaccess4-0.com. And now let's dive into the current discussions, processes, and trends in market access across the globe. Welcome to another episode of the Market Access podcast. Together, I'm very happy to have a good partner and a good friend as well, Shrutya Bhalla, as a guest in my show. Shrutya is working since roughly 12 years in healthcare, but I think even there pretty much on the commercialization of drugs. So a lot of and the vast majority of experience in there. And within those kind of different projects, you also worked in a primary research platform, which was called MAT. And I think we're also touching base on that in the next couple of minutes. Shrutya, welcome to the show. And then, of course, quickly introduce yourself to the audience who does not know you maybe until now.
Thanks, Stefan, for having me here. I have been working in drug commercialization space, specifically the consulting space, over the last 12 years, like you mentioned. I started my career with Parexel International, spent a good amount of time, at least 3 years, as a pricing and access analyst, more at a global level, and then progressed on to work with the startup back then, which was MAT and their pricing research platform and access research platform, which was called RPR, which is which I could, if I could elaborate it as rapid pair response. Now the company is called Genesis Research, and then progressed on to work with Icon PLC as their strategy consultant. And recently I was with the Emax in their global pricing access domain. And now I'm working these days on a significant pricing and access research platform. It's more of a stakeholder primary research platform. It's called Mulya. So yeah, that's where I am today.
Very good. Very good. I mean, exciting times. I mean, you mentioned already, I think you bring a lot of experience with it. And I think with the experience, I think also that probably has a good impact on the current kind of endeavor with Mulya. But maybe we take a bit of a step back. I mean, especially let's say as we have AI basically taken, I don't want to say taken over, but taken at least a key component of all of our work. But I think ultimately, and this is independent whether it's artificial or human intelligence, key question is still, I mean, how would you define, let's say, high quality primary research today, having all of your experience from human only to platform like RPR and now as well having AI? So what is it, what basically how you would really define high quality work?
High quality, when we say quality and not too high, it's very subjective term. It varies from how clients perceive it, how consultants perceive it, and how stakeholders perceive it. But there are few non-negotiables when it comes to high quality. And one of them is very pertinent. It is the solution to the client's problem at the end of the day. And when we are talking about commercialization, I think the research at the end of the day has to give the clear, defined, robust answer to the client's problem. But how does that answer help? So it has to enable decision making. And that is, in my mind, is high quality. At the end of the day, we really need to ensure that the client was able to make choices for their product and its launch, its access, its strategy, its evidence generation, its pricing. And that has to be taken care of through a primary research. So choice enablement, that too in the right direction, is pertinent for a high quality primary research. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, just doing a research a project just for the sake of running it doesn't make any sense in any kind of direction, of course. But I think sometimes, I mean, you and I, we have been working already in this area since quite a while, and sometimes we have also seen, maybe call it questionnaires, even if it was just draft questionnaires. Sometimes I still have sometimes the feeling that some questions are just in there just to have it being asked, right? But not really getting an answer which could then lead into the solution or to the answer what maybe the client needs to have, not wants to hear, but needs to have, right?
Exactly. I mean, the broader element here that gets missed in majority of the research endeavors that I have seen is that they end up being summarizations of insights, whether it's qualitative or quantitative. Like I was saying previously, a good research really has to enable strategic choices or actionable choices for clients so that they can really bring that product to the market with a favorable reimbursement or pricing outcome. And if that is not the case, based on where the product is currently, we have to ensure that we are reaching there with the research. We are enabling those questions through the research itself. It is based on solid hypotheses, and that gets tested based on solid assumptions. And at the end of the day, it is leading to robust insights, which the client can not just chew, but they can actually say, okay, this is a pricing outcome that would be most favorable in this particular location, in this particular subset of population. And that is how I would price it. But that is not where the things stop. Say, for example, there is a broader element of policy to it. So that's where the value kicks in from a consultant perspective in a pricing research, is to ensure that we are not just looking on what is it that is happening today. We base our research on what would have to be true when that policy kicks in, and how would that change the dynamics of pricing. And if that is taken into account from very beginning, of a research, I think it becomes very solid, and that leads to outputs or strategic decision-making choices for clients.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Maybe just as you have mentioned as well, choices, enable choices, and I fully agree with that. But I think a key component is, of course, as well, how to make sure that the research is robust. Meaning,
Right.
I mean, if you have only, let's say, a sample of 2, I mean, you could still have choices, but maybe it's not that robust, right? I mean, how does that play a kind of key role in that, let's say, in the execution of the primary research?
So exactly. Again, I guess I perhaps use the word robust in more of a subjective manner. Let's take a step back and look at what would a robust research looking like? Okay, it has to do a lot with the sample size, like you were mentioning, right? And it depends on where the client is at the progression of their pricing and access journey. Say, if it is a very high level understanding of pricing, a commercial outcome that they are trying to assess, maybe for a go, no-go decision, then a smaller sample size could be okay. N equal to 2 in certain countries, and that also depends on what those countries are. But when it comes to more refined pricing assessment, when we are talking about a list price assessment versus net price assessment, and the product is quite close to its phase 2 or phase 3 trial endpoints read out, it becomes quite clear that we would have to bump up the sample size and ensure that the quantitative results from a good sample size are enabling robust insights. Else it becomes, very high level understanding, and it does not lead to confirmation to a point where it is enabling choices.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, you also mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, I mean, policy, which is, of course, let's say, an interesting one. I mean, especially nowadays, I mean, we're recording that in April 26th. And I think since a year, you never know whenever you're waking up in the different parts of the world, which kind of news have, for example, arrived from the US with a new executive order whatsoever. But that's just one component, right? Of course, there are as well different reform ideas, recommendations, discussions across the globe, especially in healthcare. So I think how could our primary research basically keep up in terms of speed and then also complexity, especially when you said it needs to be actionable, it needs to have choices. I mean, we know that, and I think that was also the discussion. You can maybe as well go back there a couple of, let's say, maybe even years, right? When RPR was introduced, that was at least a kind of speed which was introduced suddenly, which is still a different angle nowadays, but maybe you can as well take that from a kind of historical path.
Yeah, it's an evolution that we have witnessed in the payer research segment over a period of time. No doubt the traditional approaches, they still exist. When I'm talking about traditional approaches, they are more aligned with the in-depth interviews that have been there in the market for a long, long time. When you look at traditional research, it would usually start with a secondary research that would take at least a few weeks, and then you start recruiting payers, which would be approximately a 1-month endeavor with the secondary research. And then you start doing the interviews, which would be another 1 month. And then you start doing insights generation, analysis, and synthesis of the report, which would be another 3 weeks. So it's almost 3 months that get spent in a traditional payer research. I'm just talking about payer research right now. And that's something we have witnessed, over a long period of time. And then we saw an evolution with software as service-based platforms like RPR, and there were others too in the same category. And their focus was more about, enabling research in a short span of time through surveys specifically started, and that too in 3 weeks of time period. The clients can get the results easily and have the insights generated in front of them. And that too was kind of very critical in terms of, saving time and even cost when it comes to doing payer research globally, and that too on demand. But that dynamic back then was more about enabling research through payers whenever it is needed, right? And that's a good way of looking at payer research. But look at where we are right now in 2025 and 2026. We are seeing, like you were saying, policy changes that specifically MFN and the corresponding models around GARD, GLOBE, Generous, when we're talking about Medicare, Medicaid, these alphabetical soups, they are becoming very complex at the end of the day. And I really want to elaborate on what complexity means here. And this is not just me, it's actually a complexity expert, Dr. Yasik Marzi, who's done a lot of quantitative work on complexity. And complexity at the end of the day is based on a lot of parameters or variables that add up to uncertainty. Previously, pricing research was more complicated, where we know the dynamics of changing price in one country and how would that be looking like in another country. But suddenly with MFN and other policies that we are seeing that are being incorporated, it is becoming more complex, where we do not know what the uncertainty is pertaining to. And this is getting complex, where we do not understand what would be that global launch sequence looking like, what would be the pricing looking like exactly, how would that portfolio of products needs to be designed with current models, and what would be the implications of going with pricing, specifically when we start with one country versus the other. And that in itself becomes very complex and difficult to comprehend. So what do we do in that scenario? And that's where we really have to think about new ways where we can ensure that payer research at the end of the day is quite informed, specifically for a consultant, specifically for a payer, and specifically for executives who are making decisions. So with a lot of new policies that come into play and payer dynamics changing, it becomes really important to keep a tab on them. There is just 1% of payer, in my opinion, who are really quite abreast with what policy changes are looking like, and then they understand their second and third order effects. But it becomes critical on part of the consulting side, where we establish deeper understanding of the policy changes and embed them very early on into the research, which brings me back to my point that I was raising earlier, that the research at the end of the day does not need to start from where we are, what is true. It has to progress to what would have to be true, with all the what ifs and the scenarios as options and choices that the clients can have at the end of the day to progress on to ensure that their product are achieving the right reimbursement outcome and pricing outcomes that they need. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think your explanation shows already as you already said as well, the complexity of the situation nowadays. But I think it basically shows two different things, right? I think complexity can be, let's say, utilized also with AI somehow. Let's discuss that. Because I think, I mean, AI, I think at the end of the day, what AI is simply doing is just calculating probabilities, right, for the different letters. Hence, if there is, let's say, an event happening with a low likelihood, but it's still happening in real life, I mean, AI generally has, in the first instance, at least some kind of, let's say, issues with that. I think that's on that side, right, with the artificial intelligence. And then the other component you already raised that as well is the human bit, which is, of course, different kind of, let's say, expert layers. Could be the consultants, who a lot of times have very detailed knowledge in a given kind of area. But then the other part is, of course, in our case, probably the payers themselves, right? Or any kind of stakeholders in the system. And I mean, all of that, let's say, together, individually makes a lot of sense. However, if you combine it, and that was traditionally, as you already alluded as well, quite time-consuming endeavor. Even with RPR, you still needed quite a couple of days or even few weeks in order to get everything together. So how could you solve that? I mean, we had a public holiday last week, Friday. That was the Friday before Easter. And I just saw, just by chance on the news, when just scrolling through my smartphone, that Trump was suddenly as well getting a new executive order with the up to 100% tariffs on drugs. Whereas, oh my goodness. I mean, I was quite relaxed in a way, because I knew basically all of our clients are, let's say, over, holidays, whatever. Nothing can be changed over the weekend. So I just read a couple of things, and then I alerted everything with my ideas maybe on Tuesday, Wednesday after Easter. But if I would have been the responsible person in the company, I mean, I would have needed already the answer basically right away, because I know that the C-levels, the senior guys, they need to have the answer. The investors are getting nervous, all of the kind of stuff. So having that in mind, how could such system with still the key components, maybe now with AI, plus the human intelligence in the two areas, how could that really help? Especially if you need the answer maybe within the latest in a few days, better in hours.
Absolutely. I mean, let's look at how AI could be leveraged. I was talking previously more about the software era, where we have seen how platforms have really helped doing research digitally and ensuring that they could be done in a span of 2 to 3 weeks. But when we are looking at market dynamics that are rapidly changing to a point where there's a lot of uncertainty, it becomes quite critical to use or leverage AI, in my opinion, but not using it as a sole tool, to be honest. It has to be used in conjunction with a human intelligence element. Before I even start explaining how that could be helpful, I think it would be better to relate with what you just had mentioned, which is that AI, at the end of the day, it's more of a prediction tool, right? It helps you understand what is going to be the next set of words looking like when we are talking about generative AI from a summarization standpoint. Say, for an example, you read that news over the weekend and you were quite surprised, but you are not Stefan, you are from Mars, but you are an executive from XYZ pharma company. Yeah. What would you do then? And you really need to understand how is that going to impact certain parameters with regards to pricing of products from my portfolio. And there it becomes really critical to understand the underpinnings of what that tariff is looking like, and pressure test it with pairs very quickly. And how do you do that? So that's where AI can kick in. And it is more about summarizing that policy order, whatever it is, very quickly in a way where we can channel it to pairs only after testing it with a human in between, and ensuring that there is right information being channeled to few pairs who can readily give us their opinion, and then based on that the executives can quickly take a decision. Now the question is, can this be rapidly done using other platforms? The answer is yes, but the core element of using AI here is automation. And that is where AI becomes quite critical. It's not just about ensuring that this can be done in a short span of time, but using automation, it is also about enabling human judgment out of it, which becomes quite improved when we have rapid responses coming to us in a very short span of time. It can be tested with one pair in one country, or it can be scaled using AI, using automation to multiple pairs in multiple countries. And that's where the scale using AI becomes very helpful, and could be readily played on to generate insights that can enable decision making for the clients.
Yeah, I think to me that makes sense. I mean, if I want to be provocative, maybe, and I heard that question already from one of the other client stakeholders. I mean, do we still need primary research, or is it just not sufficient to basically utilize AI with a very good kind of framing, especially with the AI agents nowadays? What is your opinion on that? I could assume it, but of course, just a little bit.
Yeah. No, that's a fair question, I would say. With the advancement that we are seeing with AI, I have even heard some consultants telling me that since we have seen an explosion of generative AI, suddenly our surveys are getting filled up with better responses, grammatically correct, and they sound so proper, not human at all. And I can see where they are pointing to. But what is more important here for us to realize that at the end of the day, it is humans who are enabling policies. It is humans who are making the decisions on various products. It is humans who are ensuring that the reimbursement outcomes or the preferred formulary outcomes are in place for products. And they need to know or have an informed insights about the products or where they are with regards to their reimbursement journey. Can we really do that alone with AI? We are not there yet, and we should not be there at all. It will become, to be honest, very dangerous to just leave things on AI. A human in the loop has always to be there. It is to ensure that the decisions we are getting from humans, they are based on sound judgment. So when we look at AI, it really enables good prediction to a point where you have better summaries, you have informed content that clients, peers, stakeholders can easily relate to, understand. The next component, I think, is the judgment. And when you decouple prediction from judgment, you kind of understand that judgment that lies for humans, it gets better and better if it is supported by better research, better questions, pressure tested ones that were asked to stakeholders who were better informed, had robust experience in a particular disease category. What we were doing in traditional payer research was more of hypothesis generation, which is a solid scientific method. I have seen that more rapid technology companies, they have stopped doing or are doing hypothesis generation minimally. If we can leverage AI to develop hypotheses with us as humans, I think it becomes more of an informed use case of performing pricing and access research. Therefore, it is important to leverage AI. That's one thing, as a judgment enhancing tool. But there is something more deeper that happens, when judgment improves. And that is the data that we get as insights. They can tell you that the signals are there, that can enable human judgment. But it is humans at the end of the day who will tell that why that particular response from a particular pair was real, and why it exists at the first place, and what's the rationale, the intent, the tone, and how it could be pressure tested to understand the behavior of the pair. And therefore, the human element is going to be quite critical. The AI will ensure that these kind of research through automation and all would become cheaper, because it's a downward curve on the demand curve, when we look at the economics of it. And marginally, every element of pricing research could become cheaper. When we are talking about doing secondary research, summarization of reports, pattern recognition and insights, qualitative and quantitative question generation, even hypothesis generation, all of that could be done better using AI, and on multiple projects that could be scaled. So the progression is quite economical when it comes to pricing and access research specifically, and it could be done globally and scaled. The human element definitely would improve if they are more informed, and that is still going to be critical. So to go back to your friend's question who asked about whether AI is is still necessary, or whether AI would outperform in pricing research, or if it is still needed, I think humans would always be better. Nothing can replace a PhD who has a solid experience in drugs, their understanding and how they clinically work, and have had solid experience. And this is where a critical point raises: who would be the person who would be using AI in a pricing and access team? So it would be a bit too early to give AI suddenly to an analyst. But if you give it to a consultant who has had tremendous experience, in my opinion, they would be more informed in understanding, okay, you know what, this is where I'm not getting good results or good summaries, and this is where we need to develop more informed summaries, because peers will not relate to it, or we cannot help the clients understand the so what of the questions or of the arguments. And it becomes really necessary to see who in the team is using AI at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's again making a lot of sense. I think it's also interesting that you related already, not only from a timing perspective, but also from a, let's say, economic perspective. Of course, also for the end client, which is finally industry, right? Making it not only faster, but probably also cheaper. I think just the economies of scale just makes sense. But I think at the end, or let's say, as a kind of add-on to that, you could as well maybe just say it's not only getting cheaper and faster and then cheaper. You could, of course, as well just run those projects kind of continuously, right? Whether it's a kind of screening of current policy environments. I mean, and even beyond market access and reimbursement, right? Just keep thinking what, for example, is being done in marketing, right? I mean, how does value judgment or perception change over time? Those kind of things. You can kind of, as you said it, more automize it, still having the human in the loop, or maybe even the human in the lead, but you can make it much faster, much more economical. And then, of course, you have as well more detailed information at your fingertip whenever needed. And it's not that you receive it and it's already, 6, 8, or 10 weeks old, where, of course, the world might have anyway changed, especially nowadays.
It happens a lot, and it was happening traditionally too, and with the advent of software products too, which could not keep up with the pace of the market. Say, for example, you're spending at least 3 months doing a primary research using the traditional way, and now you also want to test it in another wave of countries, which is ex-US market, specifically APAC, other regions of the world, and rest of the world, for example. And by the time you're finishing your research, there is another product that has shown their clinical trial and and suddenly there is research is quite static. What do you do then? And I think this is where software platforms were really helpful to do surveys, but where they lack is the fact that they enable insight generation too quick, and the model is just quick insight generation. They miss the element of strategic choice enablement or actionable recommendations to a point where clients feel quite relieved that they say, you know what, we have performed the research using this insight generation tool, and we really do not need another set of research. What they are doing with software tools is they still conduct research, consulting-based research, in-depth interviews. What really needs to be given to them is a full-blown research platform that can provide insights, actionable recommendations in a strategic way, and it is complete. It does not need to be another set of experiment that they have to progress on to.
Yeah, full. I think that's very clear. I mean, we're coming towards the end. How would you see where and how prime research is being conducted, executed, utilized, maybe in 2035, so in roughly 10 years' time? I mean, we have seen those jumps in the last, let's say, 20 years. I mean, the history or the historical kind of review you have already done with the kind of let's see, first only telephone interviews and everything just written down. Of course, Excel, let's say, was helping quite a lot. I think also a bit of automation, for example, from a statistical perspective. And then we had the jump, I would say, to systems like RPI you mentioned beforehand. But I think now, with this full platform where I think we're also working on, I mean, you mentioned Mulya already, which might as well revolutionize, I presume, prime research, probably as well in the next couple of very few months or even very few years. But how would you foresee what might be happening in 2035, given the pace what we have seen so far with also AI?
It is becoming quite clear that AI would be used in commercialization, evidence generation, payer-facing materials generation, and primary research would be a good component of it. I think it becomes quite relevant to scale primary research using AI and enabling the decision making for clients quickly in a cheaper format, and that too with high quality, like we were alluding to. It is going to be part of the practice, I think, where we would see that one way or the other, the clients would be using AI within their teams, consultants and their teams would be using AI one way or the other. So the initial few years where we will see is, a different way of using AI. Maybe some would use it for automation, some would collaborate it with prediction, and some would really use it for summarization specifically and the generative outputs. Slowly and slowly, as we develop more use cases, and I think it won't be too slow, it would be rapid based on how the market dynamics are changing. And the adoption, when it gets increased to a point where we feel as an industry that the outputs that we are getting are better, they are transparent to a point, they are explainable, they are adhering to the standards, specifically because these products are patient facing at the end of the day. So those kind of things, when are taken care of and we reach that point, I think this will become part of our jobs, and it will become critical to have that understanding of interaction with AI tools. There would be many in the first few years, I think, but it would come to a point that a few would survive based on their adoption. And a lot of it has to do with adaptability. And the more adaptable certain tools are, it would lead us to a point where we adopt them more. right? And if they fit into our needs, and there is a quick progression of using, just like you have a Dobo, right? And if that could enable value message testing or value messages generation, and that could be quickly tested through an AI platform, and that kind of integration is seamless for both pharma and for consulting practices, I think it becomes quite an adaptable approach, and its adoption would lead us to a point where we would see, okay, the clients, the industry in itself is favoring products like that.
Yeah, no, full agreement. Perfect. Very good. Shrutya, that was good fun, good insights. Looking forward to the future, of course, not only primary research, but also beyond, of course. I mean, it's exciting times. Thank you again for your time. And then, anyway, we see each other pretty much soon as well, face to face. Thank you, Shrutya.
Looking forward to it.
Interesting insights from Shrutya Bhalla, who has a lot of experience, of course, in primary research, running surveys and the like. But I think especially nowadays with different kind of endeavors in two directions. One, the world is just, or at least it feels like the world is just running much faster than even years before. And at the same time, we also have the solutions. Is it a solution with AI? And that's, I think, what we clearly discussed here in the podcast session with Shrutya. I think there are different kind of things which need to be taken into consideration. Of course, still, primary research needs to show actionable kind of insights, actionable kind of solution. And I think very important also what Shrutya Walzer says is still we will and need to have anyway humans not only the loop but also in the lead. And I think the key rationale for that was also quite clear. As humans make the decisions, they take the choices, and of course they as well take the responsibilities. Anyhow, primary research is changing again, I think, with platforms which are, let's say, automatically taking the latest information, news, hypotheses as well together, or generating hypotheses just within a couple of few minutes, and then just thereafter it is then translating into the kind of insights and feedback loops from the human perspective. Whether this is then from experts, for example, consultant experts, or whether this is the combination or the sole kind of input by stakeholders from the system, this is then another kind of direction for the individual project. Anyhow, I think ultimately AI plus human intelligence is bringing the kind of step forward in primary research that these projects are just getting faster being delivered, and hence also being cheaper from a costing perspective for the final clients. Reach out that kind of area anyway, as Shrutya has already alluded towards. We are also, this is the kind of clear disclosure, we're also working on such a kind of primary research platform, which will be launched shortly within 2026. That was an episode of MAP, the Market Access podcast provided by Mars Market Access and Pricing Strategy, which is your healthcare consultancy in the German-speaking markets. MAP is available every second week with a new episode, so watch out. And in case you might have questions, contact me directly and or visit our website on www.marketaccess-pricingstrategy.de.